The Texas you know today, a titan of energy, technology, and aerospace, was not born easily. It was forged in a crucible of poverty and political fire. In 1900, Texas was an agrarian outpost, a southern state psychologically tethered to the trauma of the Civil War and economically enslaved by the rhythms of the cotton harvest. By the dawn of the 21st century, it had evolved into a distinct socioeconomic nation-state. But how did we get from mule-drawn plows to microchips? The answer lies in a story of violent metamorphosis. Welcome. Today we are covering 50 years of struggle that defined the Lone Star State. We're going to meet the Petticoat Lobby, survive the apocalypse of the Dust Bowl, and watch Texas transform into the arsenal of democracy. If you love the gritty, eccentric history of Texas, smash that like button and subscribe. Let's go back to the 1890s. To understand modern Texas politics, we have to start in the dirt. In the late 19th century, the Texas farmer was fighting a trinity of woe. Banks holding their mortgages, railroads charging fortunes to ship goods, and merchants keeping them in eternal debt. From this desperation rose the People's Party. The movement was led by firebrands like James Cyclone Davis, a lawyer who earned his meteorological nickname because his speaking style was tempestuous. He traveled the state preaching that the industrial economy was a conspiracy against the producing classes.
I will eat earthworms, drink branch water, and sleep on Johnson grass hay to defeat the establishment.
That wasn't just hyperbole. It was a promise to the destitute farmers that he was one of them. While the Populist Party collapsed, its populist strain, suspicious of Wall Street and protective of the little man, was absorbed into the Texas Democratic Party. As the 20th century dawned, rural populism gave way to urban progressivism. But Texas progressivism had a dual nature. While it championed good government, it also institutionalized segregation. It was during this era that the poll tax and the white primary were implemented, effectively disenfranchising African Americans and Tejanos for decades. But not all reform was exclusionary. Enter the Petticoat Lobby. Led by Minnie Fisher Cunningham, a pharmacy graduate radicalized by the gender pay gap, suffragists in Texas utilized a strategy of relentless diplomatic pressure. After winning the vote in 1920, they formed the Joint Legislative Council. They secured federal funds for maternal care, exposed brutal prison conditions, and advocated for the end of whipping prisoners. Then there were the Fergusons. James "Pa" Ferguson was impeached in 1917 for misusing funds. So he ran his wife, Miriam. Ma Ferguson became the first female governor of Texas, running under the slogan, "Two governors for the price of one." Her tenure was marred by a pardon scandal, where freedom for bootleggers was allegedly sold for cash. Yet, the Fergusons played a crucial role in checking the power of the Ku Klux Klan. Ma Ferguson signed anti-mask legislation, stripping the Klan of their anonymity and breaking their political stranglehold on the state. The political storms of the 1920s were violent, but they were man-made. The storm that was coming next would be an act of nature, amplified by human error. The reforms of the Progressive Era were about to be buried under millions of tons of earth. While Wall Street panicked over stock tickers, Texas faced a biblical plague. On April 14, 1935, Black Sunday, witnesses described a mountain of black earth rolling across the prairie, blotting out the sun so completely that chickens went to roost at noon. The Dust Bowl was a crisis of dualities, economic collapse exacerbated by ecological apocalypse. Decades of aggressive mechanized farming had stripped the southern plains of native buffalo grass, and when the drought came, the land simply took flight. The static electricity generated by the dust storms was so intense it could short out cars and knock people down if they touched a barbed wire fence. The ecosystem collapse led to a plague of jackrabbits. Desperate communities responded with jackrabbit drives, forming human chains miles long to herd thousands of rabbits into pens to club them to death. A gruesome war to save the remaining food supply. In the depths of this misery, Texans turned to a celebrity. W. Lee Pappy O'Daniel, a flower salesman and radio host, used his band and his slogan, "Pass the biscuits, Pappy," to win the governorship. He proved that mass media appeal could bypass the traditional political machine. While Pappy sang on the radio, a young Lyndon B. Johnson was learning a harsher lesson in Cotulla, South Texas. Teaching at the Mexican school, he saw children digging through garbage piles for citrus rinds to eat. This experience seared Johnson's conscience. Decades later, the poverty he saw in Cotulla became the driving force behind his Great Society legislation. The Great Depression broke the land and the economy, but it also forged the character of the state. However, recovery wouldn't come from a song on the radio. It would come from a global conflict that required exactly what Texas had in abundance: oil and space. World War II was the pivot point of the Texas century. The state produced huge percentages of the petroleum needed to fuel the Allied war machine, transforming the Gulf Coast into a petrochemical hub. The war also brought the world to Texas. The state housed over 50,000 German, Italian, and Japanese prisoners of war. Camp Hearn was nicknamed the Fritz Ritz because the prisoners were treated so well. Escapes were rare and often comical. One German POW was recaptured quickly because he walked into a general store asking for cigarettes in a raincoat on a cloudless Texas day, a dead giveaway. But there was a darker side. The Crystal City Family Internment Camp held civilian families of Japanese and German descent. It was the only camp in the U.S. designed for families, complete with a swimming pool. The government used these internees as a bank for prisoner exchanges. American-born children were forced to repatriate to Germany or Japan, countries they had never seen, in the middle of a war zone. Texas also sent its sons to fight. Audie Murphy, a slight boy from Hunt County, rejected by the Marines for being too small, became the most decorated soldier of the war. His single-handed defense of a position in France is legendary. And there was Doris "Dory" Miller from Waco. Restricted to a mess attendant role because of his race, Miller manned an anti-aircraft gun at Pearl Harbor without training, firing until his ammo was exhausted. His heroism was a rallying cry for the WWII campaign, victory against fascism abroad and racism at home. By 1945, Texas was no longer just a land of cotton and cattle. It was an industrial giant and a military stronghold. But the heroism of men like Dory Miller made the contradictions of freedom and segregation impossible to ignore. The war set the stage for the civil rights movement and the technological boom of the late 20th century. The Texas mystique was evolving from cowboy hats to silicon chips. Question for the comments. We treated German POWs at the Fritz Ritz better than we treated African American heroes like Dory Miller. How do you think that reality influenced the civil rights movement that followed? Leave your thoughts below. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay curious.